दक्षिणामूर्ति सारंभाम् शंकराचार्य मध्यमा रमणाचार्य पर्यंता वंदे गुरु परंपरा वंदे गुरु परंपरा वंदे गुरु परंपरा शुक्लां भरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये आङ्गिकं भुवनं यस्य वाचिकं सर्ववाङ्मयम् आहार्यं चन्द्रतारादि तं नमः सात्विकं शिवम् वायुरोदनालीयते मन जालपक्षिवद्रोदसादनं चित्तवायवश्चित्क्रियायुताः शाकयोर्द्वयी शक्तिमूलक लयविनाशने उभयरोदने लयगतं पुनर्भवति नोऽमृतम् प्राणवन्दनालीनमानसम् एकचिन्तना नाशमेत्यद नष्टमानसो उत्कृष्टयोगिन कृत्यमस्ति किं स्वस्तितिं यत Salutations to Ramana, who shines as the self in every being. Let us all go back to that date, very, very special to each one of us, August 15th. But this was a date, not the date when we had got independence, but 30 years before we got independence, on that special day of August 15th, 1917, in the class of Ramana, in the school of self, Arunachala, Ramana was sitting as the teacher, and one of the student, Yoganatha, he stood up and he asked, I have a question. Bhagavan, what is the connection between the individual and the society? How should a society be? Was his question. And Ramana, he gave an answer. He told, let us go to a chapter in biology, and then I will explain to you how a society should be and what is the connection between an individual and a society. In the classroom of our minds, Arunachala Ramana, sitting as a teacher, he started singing a song and wanted all of his students to repeat. Om Shakti, Om Shakti, Om Shakti, Om Adi Shakti, Mahashakti, Ramana Shakti, Om. Om Shakti, Om Shakti, Om Shakti, Om Adi Shakti, Mahashakti, Ramana Shakti, Om. We are many, we are many, we are one. One power manifest as many functions. We are many, we are many, we are one. One power manifests as many function. The inner power consciousness, the whole of energy. The inner power consciousness, the whole of energy is everything that's auspicious. She's seen as Prakriti. The inner power consciousness, the whole of energy is everything that's auspicious. She's known as Prakriti. Nature is amazing million manifestations, yet every life is bound to others by a thread of union. Nature is amazing million manifestations, yet every life is bound to others by a thread of union. O precious life, O precious life, in the one and the many. Nature shows the path of interpersonal harmony. Nature shows the path of interpersonal harmony. In every life, how nature acts without a fuss. The science of biology makes manifest to us. Look, just look at the power of nature. She builds a body fortress and rules as its empress. With care, each thing in proper place, no less, no excess. Look how each organ, each part of the human body willingly plays its role to sing a rhapsody. Look how each organ, each part of the human body willingly plays its role to sing a rhapsody. Ramana gave an answer that just look at your own human body. There are so many varied kinds of organs, and there is organ systems. Just like how we have varied kinds of people in the society, each one doing a different function. Yet, in a society, each individual should work like a human body. How each part of the body works in harmony, how they work as a whole, and they work for the betterment of this whole body with the constant remembrance that they are working by that supreme consciousness, which is the Empress, who is taking care of each part of the body. The society should be in that way, says Ramana. And continuing the lessons, come, let us see into one of the organ systems. The one organ system which we feel is very, very important. The one organ system which makes us see what we are seeing, which makes us hear what we are hearing. It makes us taste, it makes us smell, and it makes us touch and feel. And that organ system, we think, it makes us think. Very, very important power that we have got, the power to think. And that organ system is the nervous system. We, the Council of Ministers, obey orders of I, Prime Minister. We, the Council of Ministers, obey orders of I, Prime Minister. Powered from within, we work from the headquarters. Powered from within, we work from the headquarters. Nerves form our network, We are signal transmitters, nerves form our network. We are signal transmitters. We make you see what you see. We make you see what you see. We make you hear, taste, and feel. We make you think. We think we do. What a fancy deal. What a fancy deal. This nervous system, which is led by this brain, and it is connected through the various nerves and through which the mind works. But this is a council of ministers, but they all listen to one prime minister. And that prime minister is called the I Prime Minister. And they are powered from one more power, which they don't know what is that power which is governing them. But there is one power within. The I Prime Minister is only giving commands for this and that. But there is one more power which is taking care of this whole system. And that very same power is taking care of various things in the body. The brain, the how we understand is it is making us do all the voluntary movements. If you have to move our hands, the brain is making it move. If you have to move from one place to another place, the brain is making us, giving instructions to all the parts of the body through its nerves to move and to act and to dance. But this great power, it is taking care of all the involuntary actions that are also happening within us. And the involuntary of the functions are the food getting digested in our stomach, and how the heart is pumping the blood to all the parts of the body, nourishing each part of the body. And one more involuntary function that is being taken care by this supreme consciousness called the Prakriti is the respiratory process. And here's a song on the respiratory system. Receiving through nostril gates, oxygen, the vital gas. Receiving through nostril gates, oxygen, the vital guest. We welcome him through trachea into our inner chambers, the chest. We breathe fresh air into our lungs. Carbon dioxide bids farewell. We breathe fresh air into our lungs. Carbon dioxide bids farewell. Dear friend diaphragm, help our lungs to shrink and swell. Dear friend diaphragm, helps our lungs to shrink and swell. We perform our loving chore, this ritual eternal. We perform this loving chore, this ritual eternal, to nurture and keep in good health every organ internal. We are the respiratory system. Subject in service of body kingdom. Subject in service of body kingdom. The respiratory organ is breathing the oxygen and breathing out the carbon dioxide. But the respiratory system never says it is because of my power that you are able to be alive. Never takes that pride in itself. It is doing this chore, its loving chore, without a break. That consciousness within, it is making it work without even taking a minute's rest. Such is the power of that consciousness which is there within us, which is taking care of each part of the body. And Ramana says that this breathing is happening continuously. The mind, the brain, which is working the all through the day, the mind, it wants rest. So when we rest our body, the mind still keeps working in our dreams. We have different thoughts in the dreams. And after that, the mind cannot sustain. It has to take rest. So the mind subsides in that consciousness which is in the heart. And the next day morning, when it wakes up, the mind again starts working through the brain. It is filled with energy again to carry on the day, the work of that next day. But this breathing is happening continuously. There is not even a second's break. And Ramana says the glory of this breathing, that this breathing is there even in our deep sleep. The mind does not exist, but the breathing still continues to sustain the functions of the body. And Ramana says that this breathing is also there because nobody should mistake ourselves that if one person is sleeping, the sleep is equal to death. The Shastra says, and Ramana also says in his talks with Ramana Maharshi, where he says that the death is we experience the death. We experience that everything goes away, even the mind goes away. The thought that we are this body disappears in our sleep. That is equivalent to death. In that experience, the breath alone continues so that the outside people who are seeing us, they don't confuse the sleep to death so that they don't harm this body. The breath continues continuously, eternally until we breathe our last. And in the child development, we hear that the breath starts the first thing as soon as the child enters this world, the child cries. That cry of the child is the first breath that it is taking. For the first time, it is taking the breath and it cries because something new is happening. And sometimes when the baby is born without crying, then the nurse and the doctor, they make the baby cry because at that moment when the baby is not crying, the breath is not happening. When that does not happen, the oxygen is not provided to all parts of the body. And we hear that when this oxygen, there is a deficit of oxygen to the brain, the child may be born with some disabilities and some challenges, the mental challenges which will be caused. So this breath is the first thing that happens as soon as the baby is born. And this happens eternally till the last breath when we drop the body. So such is that loving chore that this respiratory system is doing. And Ramana says, how beautiful is the civics of this body. And he says, civics of good governance through this loving monarchy. Every organ system here has full freedom, democracy, responsible to the whole day, act with perfect synchrony. Responsible to the whole day, act with perfect synchrony unless ego interferes. Aham, 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 aham. Until ego interferes, there is never anarchy. The monarchy is when there is a loving king who loves all his subjects and he does not do any partiality between his subjects. So this supreme power within us and all these organ system, it's subject and it is taking care of each organ system in the right way with no less or no excess. Such is the love of this monarch who is taking care, and there is never anarchy. But until the ego interferes, when the ego interferes, there is a problem. When the ego rises as I am this body, the thought that I am this body and I am afraid of something. At that time, the breath becomes heavy. There is the intervention of the ego in that, the supreme rhapsody, beautiful harmony that is happening. When the ego intervenes, there is a problem. When the ego says, I'm loving this, I'm so excited, then again there is an intervention in the respiration. When the ego says, oh, I don't like that, there is the holding of the breath. And when there is fear, there is worry, there is tension, the, the speed of the breath is intervened and there is a change in the breath. We see that whenever this ego intervenes, whenever there is the mind which is bringing these thoughts in us, there is a problem in the system of respiration. And Ramana says, yes, because the breathing and the mind are interconnected. He says, Vayu Rodhana Liyate Mana Jala Pakshiva Drodha Sadhanam. If you take an opposite example, whenever we see something which is stunning, whenever we see something which is beautiful and shocking, our breath is caught. And we are in that stillness when we have this experience of wonder. In the same way, Ramana says, the mind, when in wonder, the mind is stuck with one thought. So the mind becomes still. When the mind becomes still, the breath also becomes still. Ramana says you can use this as the sadhana because the breath and the mind are connected. So when holds the breath, when one controls the breath, Vayu Rodana Liyate Mana, when we control the breath, hold the breath, the mind also gets subside. Just like Jala Pakshiva Drodha Sadhanam, just like how a bird is caught in the net, in the same way, the mind is caught. And what is the reason? Because he says, Chitta Vayavash Chit Kriyayutah Shakayor Dvayi Shakti Mulaka. He says, Chitta Vayava Chit Kriyayutah Shakayor Dvayi Shakti Mulaka. This is the verse which has inspired today's topic. The Vayu, that is the breath, and the Manas, the Chitta, they both are the branch of the same tree. And that same tree which is rooted in the Supreme Self, that which is our own true nature, that pure consciousness, that Satchit Ananda. From that power, these two branches branch out. What are those two branches? That is the Vayu and the Chitta. And Ramana says this Vayu manifests as the Kriya. It manifests as the various actions that we do with our hands, legs, and with our mouth. Vayu is required for speech also. And the various activities of eating and digesting, all these activities are happening through the Vayu. And Chitta, the Manas, it gives rise to the thoughts. So Ramana says the thoughts and the actions which spring out from the breath and the actions spring out from the breath and the thoughts springing out from the Chitta, the Manas, they both are rooted in the same source. Shakti is one. That one power is the same. So one needs to find out what is this source which is making us breathe and which is also making us think. So in our dance exercise, when the student says we are tired of doing a step, then I quickly tell them, okay, when the ego is involved, when we think that I am doing a work, I am dancing, I am singing, we get tired very easily. But the breathing is happening naturally. Have you ever told we are tired of breathing? We never tell that. The heart is pumping the blood. Do we ever say, we are tired of pumping the blood to all the parts of the body? We never tell that, because those are happening without the intervention of the ego. The ego only makes us tired, but that supreme power is all powerful. It never gets tired. It is such power that it is ever there. So, these thought, which is the manifestation of the ego, it is the only problem which is creating problems. So, Ramana says the only thing that has to be tackled is this manas, or the ego. He says they are the same name for the same tattva, the same antakarana, what we call it, manifests as manas and ego and chitta and ahankara. And it is the same thing which has to be tackled. And what needs to be done is this mind has to be quietened. One devotee comes to a guru and he says, Swami, I want to realize God. I want to see God. Please make me see God. And the guru says, I'm going now to take a bath. Why don't you follow me to the nearby pond? And both that disciple who had come and the guru goes to the pond and he says, please come and bathe with me in this pond. And when the guru is inside the water and the disciple also comes inside the water, the guru holds the head of the disciple and pushes him inside the water. And the disciple is struggling, and he somehow finds a way and he comes out and he says, Swami, why did you do this? I was out of my breath. And the guru says, what did you want the most when you were under the water? When I had pushed you under the water, what did you want the most? And the disciple says, I wanted air. I wanted to breathe. And the guru says, until you have that great desire, that great need, that I want God, just like how you wanted breath, until then, it is difficult to see God. So we need to cultivate that great desire to attain God. And the Ramana says that we need to have that desire, just how natural the breathing is happening. One needs to get natural in one's sadhana. Ramana says, even when the self is realized, the sadhana keeps happening effortlessly, just like how the breath is happening. The attention which has to be turned towards the self, it will happen automatically and naturally and effortlessly, says Bhagwan Ramana. And we all know of the great sadhakas like the Ekanath, who his sadhana was to chant the name of Rama, and that name of Rama was happening constantly. Just like Ramana says, Ajya Dharaya Srota Sasamam, just like how the river flows and how the flow of the ghee happens. In that way, the sadhana was happening all the time. The great devotees, those, the Eknath and others, they used to spend their whole day in meditation, in samadhi, and the whole night they used to sing the glory of the divine. Such was their sadhana, continuous sadhana. And this Eknath, I'm sorry, I think it's Tukaram, which Ramana mentions. The Tukaram is meditating on the name of Rama, 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 chanting the name of Rama. And when he is attending the nature's call also, he's chanting the name of Rama, Rama, Rama. And a set of orthodox Brahmins are going that way. And they say, Tukaram, what are you doing? You are chanting the sacred name while answering the calls of nature. Chi, 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 chi. You should not do that. You should remain silent. while attending the nature call. You should not utter those sacred name of Rama. And Tukaram said, okay, let that be so. And next time when he was attending the nature's call, he was silent. And the the people who were passing by, they could hear the name of Rama, 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 reverberating in that atmosphere. And they wondered, from where is this coming? Tukaram has his mouth shut. From where is this coming? Then they realized that every pore of Tukaram was chanting the name of Rama. Such in that way the sadhana should be there. It should be continuous like the Ajya Dharaya. And this breath is happening Ajya Dharaya. But as I told you, the ego is interfering and creating problems. So Ramana says one needs to subside the manas. Ramana says when we hold on to the breath, when we practice pranayama, the pranayama, there are various names given to the process that we do. The inhaling of the breath is called the puraka, and the retaining the breath is called the kumbhaka, and exhaling the breath is called the rechaka. In the kumbhaka, the retaining the breath, there are two ways. When one holds the breath, when one is performing the inhalation, the puraka, when one holds the breath, it is called the anta kumbhaka. And while breathing out, if one holds the breath, that is called the bahya kumbhaka. And these are practiced by the yogis, the control of breath. But Ramana says, you don't have to interfere with the breath. The breath is happening naturally. Do not interfere with it. Do not try to control the breath. It is happening by the divine scheme. What one needs to do is to pay attention to the breathing and pay attention to the source of the breath. That will subside the mind. And he continues, Laya Vinashane, Ubhaya Rodane, Laya Gatam Punar, Bhavati Nomritam, Laya Gatam Punar Bhavati Nomritam. He says, in the Laya, there are two ways of subsiding the mind. The one is the Mano Laya, the other is the Mano Nasha. The manolaya is the subsiding of the mind. It is the mind getting lulled. This experience we have every day. The mind is lulled in our deep sleep. Or when we are doing a work and we are caught up in that work, we just forget the time and the space that we are in. At that moment, we are in the state of mano laya, where the mind does not seem to be there. But there is no use of mano laya because punar bhavati, the mind will come again. Once we get up from the sleep, as soon as you wake up, the mind is already there and it has started its activity. And every activity of the mind, which is called thought, says is sorrow, says Bhagavan Ramana. So there is no use of manolaya. We think that, after I achieve this, I am going to be happy. We all know that we would have had a goal in our lives. After finishing my 10th standard, I'll be very, very happy. So at that point, when we finish the 10th standard and we get the result and we have got good marks, at that time we feel very, very happy. What is that happiness? It is that the mind is getting lulled and it is going back to its true source, the self. We have the taste of the self, but that is no use. Soon after we finish the 10th standard, the mind again has a desire that we have to continue our studies and do something else, finish our degrees. And we'll say, aha, if I finish my degree, I'll be the happiest person in the whole world. And when we achieve that, we have a small taste of the self. We are happy. That is only because the mind is lulled. But that lulling of mind is no use because again the mind rises. No mritam. It does not get destroyed. Until the mind is there, new desires keep cropping up, new thoughts keep cropping up. And when the desires come, Buddha says, the desire is the true cause of sorrow. So every thought is a desire and every thought is sorrow. So we can only get freed from this by the Manonasha. Bhagwan gives an example of a great sadhu who, who was sitting with his disciples, and he told one of his disciples, there was a river flowing by beside their presence, and he told one of his disciples, why don't you get some water? I'm very, very thirsty. And the disciple had just gone to get the water from the river which was flowing nearby. And by the time the disciple could come, the, the sadhu, the great teacher, guru, was in the samadhi state. And no effort of his disciples could wake him up from that samadhi state. So he was in that samadhi state for many, 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 many days, months, years. And they say how many years is that even the river which was flowing beside him, it changed its course. So many, many years had passed. And when that Swami opened his eyes, that sadhu opened his eyes, the first thought which came to him was water, water. And Ramana says, what is the use of such a state where one can be in the samadhi state for many, many long, long duration, but as soon as one comes out from that state, one goes back to the same ways of the mind. One has desires, one has thirst, one has hunger, one has the desire to achieve many, many things. What is the use of such state? In the Tripura Rahasyam, which Ramana you refers to his devotees, there is a story of a great king called Hemachuda. And his wife, Hemaleka, is a great jnani. She, without revealing her true state, she teaches the Raja, Hemachuda, with the signs of getting back to the self and enjoying the bliss which is his true nature. And slowly the Raja is practicing this attention, self-attention, and he experiences great bliss in that samadhi state, Savikalpa Samadhi, where he is meditating on the heart and he is experiencing this supreme blissful state. And the Hemachuda comes and she wakes him, shakes him up, and she makes him get up from that state, supreme state of bliss that the king is experiencing. And the king says, oh Rani, what did you do? I was in that supreme blissful state. I was enjoying that state. Why did you wake me up? Why did you make me open my eyes? Says the king, Hemachuda. And Hemaleka says, what is the use of that state which gets disturbed just by the movement of the eyelid? What is the use of such a state which is just fleeting, which goes away, which comes and goes? So one needs to abide in that state of Sahaja Samadhi, which Ramana was ever abiding in. And Ramana says the only way to attain Sahaja Samadhi is to destroy the mind. Mano Nasha has to happen. And Ramana says, how is this possible? Is it possible by pranayama? Is it possible by yoga? Is it possible by bhakti? Is it possible by karma? How is it possible? Ramana says, prana bandhana lina manasam eka chintana nashametyada. He says that the mind which is quietened by prana bandhana, when one controls the mind through pranayama or just paying attention to the breathing, one's mind becomes calm and silent, At that moment, do not stop at that point. Turn within quickly and turn towards the source. Prana bandhana lina manasam eka chintana nashametyada. That silent mind, when it is turned towards that eka, that which alone exists, that self which alone powers the whole universe, when one turns towards that power, the mano nasha happens. And what is that power which is shining within us? The same power which is making the sun shine bright, the same power which is making the moon reflect the light of the sun, the same power which is making each star twinkle, the same power which is making the earth rotate and revolve, the same power which is making the rivers flow, the same power which is carrying the huge mountains, the same power which is exploding as the volcano, that very same power is there within us. And that very same power is making every movement possible. That very same power is making us breathe in and breathe out. That very same power is making us rise as the I thought, the ego, the prime minister. And that prime minister is manifesting himself with various commands. And those are the very thoughts which all the true source of all this is that one power, the mind which is quietened by the control of the breath has to be quickly turned towards that eka, that one power which is shining within. And when that happens, the mind is destroyed. नष्टमानसो उत्कृष्टयोगिना कृत्यम् अस्ति किं स्वस्तिथिं यत नष्टमानसो उत्कृष्टयोगिना कृत्यम् अस्ति किं स्वस्तिथिं यत. To such a one who, a great yogi who has destroyed the mind, what else needs to be done by him? The only thing that he has to do is abide as the self. And Ramana, not only he's preaching this in his Upadesa Saram, he only preaches, he says, I'm only preaching what I know. You can preach whatever you know, but I'm only telling what is my experience. And Ramana, what he is telling us is his own experience, which he experienced as a boy of 16 in his uncle's house in Madurai. The Madurai, the Meenakshi Puri, the abode of Devi Meenakshi, and in the south, the road which is going from the south tower, the Chokkapanayakan street, in his uncle Subbu Ayer's house, this boy Venkatraman, just 16 years old, was sitting alone in the room which was there in the first floor. And he was suddenly gripped by a fear of death. And that fear of death was so strong that he could not push it away, saying that it's only a thought, only my imagination. Such strong was that feeling, the fear of death. And he did not feel like he thought he could not escape it anyways. There's no use of going to a doctor or his relatives and telling his problem. The only way to tackle this problem is to face the death and find out what death truly is, and to find out what is the thing which truly dies. And Ramana, he enacted death. He lied down on the floor just like a corpse, as if the rigor mortis has set. He became stiff like a corpse, and he did not breathe. prana bandhana. Then he did not even utter any word, even the word I. And he became still, and he became introverted, and he had a feeling that he is dead. And now, after some time, this body is going to be taken to the cremation ground, and it is going to be burnt into ashes. And even when that happens, there is this power which is shining as I, I. Even when the body ceases to exist, even when there is no breath, even when the heart is not beating, even when there is no words uttered, even when there is no thought, even when there is no mind, this power exists. This power which is shining like a dynamo, like an avesham, like an energy. That power is truly me. I am not this body. I am that power. This truth that young boy Venkatraman understood. Later, the boy Venkatraman was no more, and he had become the great yogi who had destroyed the mind. Nashtamanaso utkrishta yogina krityamasti kim swastitim yata yogi ramana parama guruve yogi ramana parama guruve yogi ramana parama guruve yogi ramana parama guruve ತ್ಯಾಗಿಯುನಿ ಸುಖ ಶಾಂತಿಯುನೀನೆ ಭೋಗಿಯ ಹೃದಯದಿ ರಾಜಿಪೆ ನೀನೆ ತ್ಯಾಗಿಯುನಿ ಸುಖ ಶಾಂತಿಯು ನೀನೆ ಭೋಗಿಯ ಹೃದಯದಿ ರಾಜಿಪೆ ನೀನೆ ತ್ಯಾಗ ಭೋಗ ಸುಖ ದಾತನು ನೀನೆ ತ್ಯಾಗ ಭೋಗ ಸುಖ ಧಾತನು ನೀನೆ ಭಾಗಿದ ಶರಣರ ನೀ ಕಾಯೋ ಭಾಗಿದ ಶರಣರ ನೀ ಕಾಯೋ ಯೋಗಿ ರಮಣ ಪರಮ ಗುರುವೇ Ramana had become the great yogi, that yogi who is none other than the very own self, that power which makes us experience everything. It makes us experience sacrifice. It makes us experience the peace. And it is the same power which is making us experience the happiness, the bhoga, the pleasures of the life. It is also experienced only by the presence of that power. And Ramana had become one with that power. And how did Ramana become one with that power? Balakanagire kalana nodi chaladi manava bandana ಮಾಡಿ ಬಾಲಕನಾಗಿರೆ ಕಾಲನ ನೋಡಿ ಛಲದಿ ಮನವ ಬಂಧನ ಮಾಡಿ ಹಲವು ಜನ್ಮದ ಭ್ರಾಂತಿಯ ನೀಗಿ ಹಲವು ಜನ್ಮದ ಭ್ರಾಂತಿ ನೀಗಿ ಕಾಲನ ಲೀಲೆಯ ನೀಗೊಲಿದೆ ಕಾಲನ ಲೀಲೆಯ ನೀ ಗೆಲಿದೆ ಯೋಗಿ ರಮಣ ಪರಮ ಗುರುವೇ ಯೋಗಿ ರಮಣ ಪರಮ ಗುರುವೇ Ramana, we all say that Marana, the death is bad, but the birth is to be rejoiced. The Ramana says, both are same. Find out Who is born and who dies? There is nothing which is born and nothing which is dead, because the self does not have janana and marana. It does not have birth or death. Find out what is the glory of this death. What happens? He, as a little boy of 16, he faced the death and he won over the death. He understood that what dies is only the body. What dies is only the mind, only the ego which dies. And when that happens, we are filled with the fear. Oh, I am losing my identity. We are in the sadhana, every sadhaka, it is told that they experience this fear that they are losing their identity and they are shaken. Ramana says, just question, for whom is this fear? The fear is only for the ego. And the ego does not have a real existence at all. He says, he gives an example of how two threads are tied in a knot. The one thread is this body, which is jada, and the other thread is the consciousness. The thread which binds these two together is the knot of the ego. But when one unties the knot, where did the knot go? Knot just disappears. So this ego is just like the knot. The knot is not. The knot does not have a true existence. So Ramana says, find out, what is this death? Find out. When every breath that we take is the is we are being born, and every breath which subsides, we are dying. Find out from where is this birth and death is happening, this leela of janana marana, where is this happening? Find out and turn towards that source. And at that point, you become that great yogi which Ramana had become. And he continues, Nanarim Buddha Tilidavani Nananinnuva Atmavu Nine Nanarim Buddha ತಿಳಿದವನೀನೇ ನಾನಾನ್ಯೆನ್ನುವ ಆತ್ಮನು ನೀನೇ ಜನನ ಬಂಧನ ಅತೀತ ನೀನೇ ನಿನ್ನ ಭಕ್ತರ ಪೊರೆ ಗುರುವೋ ನಿನ್ನ ಭಕ್ತರ ಪೊರೆ ಗುರುವೋ ರಮಣ you are the guru. You have come to our lives to reveal who we really are. We are thinking that the dress that we are wearing is we. This is me, we are thinking. But Ramana says, you are wearing 5 layered dresses. And what are those 5 layered dresses? The one is the Annamaya Kosha, the physical body which is taken care by the anna, the food that we eat, is the Annamaya Kosha. And deeper than that is one more layer that we are wearing, which is the Pranamaya Kosha, which is our breath. And subtler than that, we have one more kosha, we have the Manomaya Kosha. And subtler than that, we have one more kosha, which is called the Vijnanamaya Kosha, the intellect which says this is right and that is wrong. And deeper than that is one more kosha, which is called the Anandamaya Kosha, which we experience as the ignorance in deep sleep. And these 5 layers of clothes that we are wearing, and we are thinking that this body which is made up of these 5 layers is me. Ramana has come to destroy this false notion. When we see that when we practice pranayama, the kosha which is subtler than the Annamaya Kosha, when we practice pranayama, the control of breath, the Annamaya Kosha is taken care. When we learn how to breathe properly, according to the instructions of the yoga instructor, then the problems in our body is resolved. When the subtler than the pranamaya kosha is the manomaya kosha. When the manas is tackled, when the mind is subsided through the various ways of sadhana, including the self-inquiry, which Ramana says, when the mind is subsided, the pranamaya kosha and the annamaya kosha, the body and the breath is taken care. And when we have the right attitude, when we start seeing through our intellect things in the proper place without judging anything, accepting everything as the divine plan, because the supreme intellect is the divine and he has planned everything perfectly. When we are commenting on something, this is not right, that is right, this is wrong, we are commenting on the supreme intellect who knows everything, whose intellect is much more greater than the intellect of all the creatures in the whole universe. Such is the intellect, so he knows the best. So I usually keep telling, everything is the dance of Nataraja. So if we are finding out this is not right, that is not right, we are commenting, this Nataraja's choreography is not okay, he is doing a mistake in his dance. So we are commenting on that supreme choreographer's choreography. So the Ramana says, when we have the right attitude, then everything is taken care. The manomaya kosha becomes all right, the pranamaya kosha and the physical body is taken care. But Ramana says, if one through self-inquiry gets in touch with the true source, when these vasanas which manifest as the anandamaya kosha or ajnanamaya kosha, when this ignorance is taken care, it is completely destroyed, then we get in touch with that supreme power. And when one gets in touch with that supreme power, everything is taken care. So such is the glory of turning back our attention to the self. And this is what Ramana says, that in his Ekashloki he says, Hridaya Kuhara Madhye Kevalam Brahma Matram Ahamahamiti Sakshat Atmarupena Bhati Hridi Visha Manasa Swam Chinvata Majjatava Bhavana Chalana Rodhat Atmanishto Bhavatvam. The only instructions that Ramana is giving, the only blessing that Ramana is also giving us is Atmanishto Bhavatvam. Be the Atma, ever abide in Atma. And you can do it in any way, whichever way is blessed to you, you follow that path. Either turn your attention to the self, or through self-inquiry, or diving deep into the heart, into the presence of the divine within through bhakti, or by controlling the breath, or by observing the breath. You can follow any sadhana, but the most important thing is to get back to the self and abide as the self. Nanda Kumarji, who is a senior practitioner of self-inquiry, he says in these 5 verses of Upadesa Saram, Ramana is summarizing the first 10 verses. These are the verses from verse 11 to verse 15. These 5 verses, they summarize and bring
Please stay with us. Ujwal is Ujwal ji is fixing his technical issue, and the talk will resume very shortly now, anytime. Just stay with us, please. Namo Ramana Ujwal.
No, Ramana, there seems to be a problem with my laptop, so I've connected to my
Yeah,
mobile.
this
This work.
phone. Okay, fine, fine.
Yes. Now, I was just telling that Nanda Kumar ji says that the verses 7, 11 to 15 summarizes the first 10 verses of the Upadesa Saram. So quickly we will go on what teaching lies in those first 10 verses of Upadesa Saram. It talks about the karma marga, and here the karma that we are looking into is the breathing. Karturajnaya prapyate palam karma kim param karma tajjadam. The action gives us fruit only by the supreme ordainer's command. There is no use. There is the action does not have any power. It is jadam, says Bhagwan Ramana in the first verse. And we see very obviously in the breathing. The breathing is happening only by the supreme power, the supreme command of the supreme. He alone can make us breathe. When he decides that we should not breathe, the breath stops. So it is only happening by that supreme power. Kritimho dadau patana karanam palam ashashvatam gati nirodakam. He says that once breathing, can we stop breathe only once in our lifetime and we stop breathing? That's not possible. So after the one breath, you need to exhale and one more breath has to be taken. So the process of breathing is happening just like the ocean of actions, one after the other. The waves of breath is coming on and on and on. It makes us fall into the ocean of the action. Kritima hodadau patana karanam phalam ashashvatam gati nirodakam. If we just keep going on breathing, Venkatesh ji, one of our sadhaka, says that if you simply become a machine which is taking in oxygen and giving out carbon dioxide, there is no use. We need to make use of this machine and do that which we have come for, do our paramount duty. And what is that duty? Ishwararpitam nechaya kritam chittashodakam mukti sadakam. One needs to offer every action to the Ishvara. The Ishvara is none other than the self which is shining within each one of us. One needs to offer every thought, every breath to that Ishvara. Ishvararpitam Nechayakritam, without any desire of controlling the breath or to have the skill of holding on to the breath for a long time. Without having any such desires, Nechayakritam, it purifies our mind and it is the sadhaka for us to take us to our own true nature. Kaya Vangmana Karyamuttamam Pujanam Japaschintanam Pramat. The three ways of offering puja is through the Kaya, Vak and Manas. And these three are greater in that ascending order. We can do puja with our body and we can sing the name of the Supreme and we can meditate. Ramana says better than the puja is to sing the glory of the God, and to meditate is much more greater. We see that the the the, the sadhana that we do, the greater than the breath which makes us do the action is the mind, to find out from where the mind is arising. So that is the teaching that he's telling us in this verse. And he continues to say, Kaya Vangmana Karyamuttamam Pujanam Japaschintanam Kramat Jagata Ishadhi Yukta Sevanam Ashtamurti Deva Pujanam. The best form of worship is to see the divine in the eightfold forms and do the Yukta Sevanam to them, the appropriate seva to them. And what are these Ashtamurtis? The five Panchabhutas, the sun and the moon and the Jiva. These are the eight Ashtamurtis. And we see that this body is the embodiment of all the five elements. So this body is the five elements, and the Surya and Chandra, the sun and the moon, is compared to the heart, which is the sun, and the mind, which is the moon, and the Jiva is the ego. And Ramana says, you need to do Yukta Sevanam to them. What is Yukta Sevanam? The body has to be taken care with the proper food and rest, and it has to be given a proper clothing and shelter. That has to be taken care. And what is the best thing that we can do to the mind and the heart? The mind should be turned towards the heart. And what needs to be done with the Jiva? The Jiva, which thinks that it is the ego and all powerful, has to be surrendered to that heart, to that self. This is the Yukta Sevanam that we can do. And he continues, Uttamastava Duchamandata Chittajam Japa Dhyanamuttamam. Instead of singing the name loudly, it's better to sing the name of the Lord softly, and to meditate in the heart is much more better in silence. When Ramana says, when we are breathing in and out, instead of breathing that great ucha, the great breathing which is very, very heavy, it's better to breathe softly. And better than that is to turn our attention to the source of the breath and be calm and subsiding at that source. And he continues to say, Ajya dharaya srota sasamam sarala chintanam virala tapparam. One needs to get inspired by this breath, the breath which is constantly happening. Our sadhana also should be like that. And there's a great mantra called the So-Ham mantra. The So-Ham mantra is the great mantra which says, So Aham, I am that. So every breath should remind us of that truth, that we are that divine beings. We are not this body, the mind and the intellect and the breath. We are the deeper source of all these manifestations, says Bhagavan Ramana. Bheda bhavanat sohamityasau bhavana bhida pavani mata. In this, he says, instead of having the bhavana of God being a separate entity, have the bhavana, have at least the thought that so aham. And this is the mantra which we need to chant while taking every breath. And he continues to say, Bhava Shunya Sat Bhava Sustiti Bhavana Bhalat Bhakti Ruttama. If one holds on to this bhavana of I am that, I am the self, and turn towards the source of the breath and the mind and hold on to that source, we experience the Bhava Shunya Sthiti. And that Bhava Shunya Sthiti is full of love. It is Bhakti. It's the highest manifestation of Bhakti. And the 10th verse, which is the heart of the Upadesa Saram, Ramana talks about the heart. Hritsthale mana swastata kriya bhakti yoga bodhascha nishchitam. Hritsthale mana, when the mind subsides in the Hritshthala, in the space of the heart, that is true kriya, the true karma yoga, true bhakti yoga, true maha yoga, and it is the true jnana. The topic of today's talk was the branches of the same tree. And where does this tree grow? it grows on the soil, the fertile soil. And the Hritsthala is that fertile soil in which the tree of the ego is rising, and it manifests as the various branches, including these two branches, which is the breath and the mind. And one should not get carried away by the fruits that these branches are giving. One needs to be thankful, and one has to water the Hritsthala, that only which is making the fruits grow in these branches. So one needs to water the land with the water of attention. Ramana says, turn within towards that source of these two branches and abide there. That is the true, that is your own true nature, and that is true happiness and peace. This month we are celebrating the 100th year of Mother getting her Samadhi, Mother attaining Samadhi on tomorrow, which is the auspicious day, the Panchami of the Vaishakhi month, where Bhagavan knew that the end of Mother dropping her body had come. So he sat with Mother with one hand on the heart, his right hand on the heart, and the left hand on the Mother's head, and making her undergo the various janmas, undergo all her vasanas to be extinguished through the self-inquiry. Nanda Kumarji pointed out that the brain is bringing us thoughts, and this hand of Bhagavan Ramana, which is still there on all the seekers, this hand is telling, don't perceive this thought. Find out for whom is this thought, and the answer is for me. And turn your attention to the other hand of Bhagavan Ramana, the right hand, which is pointing to the heart. Ramana says, through this process of turning our attention back to the source, to the heart, we can attain that supreme state which Mother Alagammal attained. And her, when Alagammal attained Samadhi, her body was glowing like the body of a yogini. And Ramana told, she has not passed away, she has been absorbed. So there is no impurity. Come, let us all have the dinner. So everybody had dinner that night, and the whole night the various hymns were sung, and the body of the Mother was brought down to the feet of Arunachala near the Palitikam. A Samadhi was built, and Matra Bhuteshwara Linga, the Bhuteshwara, the Shiva, who had come as Mother to bore his own light. A Samadhi was built for her, and the Ramanashram that we see today has grown around her Samadhi, and that Samadhi is at the fulcrum of Ramanashramam, and she reminds us of us getting back to our center, our fulcrum, which is the heart. And she is filling us with all that we need to do this sadhana. She is giving us food, she is giving us shelter and clothing, and she has also given us Sadguru Ramana in the human form, in which we can relate to and listen to his words and meditate and get back to that source. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. I thank the meditation and study circle, Vaniji and Vasudevji, for giving me this beautiful opportunity to meditate on these verses given by Ramana in Upadesa Saram, and a manana and a reminder for each one of us, including me, to get back to that source which alone is required and which alone is the paramount duty. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.